Welcome to Coffee with Kusari. I'm your host, Ben Cotton, and today I'm joined by Tim Miller, co founder and CEO of Kusari.
I'm Tim Miller, CEO and one of the co-founders of Kusari. We've been caring a lot about supply chain security since way before that was a word that anybody knew. So all this stuff kind of just evolved into just being high quality, being really diligent, and keeping track of all the stuff that you got, and that somehow became the problem set that we're really familiar with.
So, I remember one of the questions I asked you when I was joining Kusari is, why hire an open source community lead now when the company is so small? And, you gave a very thoughtful answer about the importance of, building security tools in a community way and the reliance that not just Kusari but the entire industry has on the open source ecosystem. But I'm curious, like, how do you think about trying to prioritize the roles in the company when you're putting together this team initially?
Yeah, so on the first part, in terms of why you have open source anything as such a small company, I think one of the things that we always really valued or found was really important, no matter where we were, was a small company or not, was if you want to be in touch with what's actually happening, where the trends are, and really have your finger on what people really care about, the open source community is the best place to do that. The main reason being, most of the people there don't have to be there, and so you're dealing with folks who are doing this because they really feel compelled, either through just really strong conviction or something that they're really interested in. But that's where folks like spending time with people like that on the problems that really matter, I think, is the best way. It's like find the hobbyists in anything to really get the neat tips and tricks on something. And so, just practically speaking, when we're trying to build a security company that really focuses, especially on open source dependencies, ignoring that or not being heavily invested, at least in even understanding what people are doing, would be a wild mistake in our opinion. So we could go sell security software, but we really feel like we'd be missing the boat. And so, just practically speaking, that seems like the right way to do it for us. And then separately, there's all these perceptions, I think, about a lot of big companies kind of use a lot of the open source community, but don't really push back into it. And so, if we can fix that perception even when we're small, that was also super important for us. It still is, and I think that always will be. It's always questions about open source versus closed source and things like that. But at a fundamental level, ignoring it seems like a wild mistake. Um, and then, yeah, the other part about how do we build a team and what's important. Um, at this stage, what we were really looking for was to just find the best people for the things that we care about and then let them go. And so, as opposed to saying, hey, I need you to do this thing for me, find the people who really understand what's going on, pull them in, and then let them tell us what we need to do. So it was this inversion of control, to use a design pattern for uh, for the team building. So explicitly not a top-down design for what the org structure needs to look like, especially at the small size that we are. But let it grow. Give them no boundaries around what they need to go do, and then we'll form it around those folks. But we like to view hiring as a like enabling these superstars with like more powers as we hire around them. Um, yeah, that was part of why we on purpose hired such a small team, so we could have just the folks who would provide absolute trust into the decisions that they're making, so that we can focus on where we need to go, what problems we're solving, things like the open source and being involved in our communities, and just let them run at the actual technical problems and what we need to deal with. But that was really the entire strategy.
So you mentioned trust, and I think for a lot of people that means someone with a long track record in a role, maybe with progressively more responsible and a big portfolio they can show to and say, I did this. But it's interesting that one of the early software engineer hires uh, was still in high school. And so I'm curious, how you think about how you evaluate the trust when you're talking to candidates.
Yeah, so one of the so yeah that strangely enough circles back to the open source community. That was like one of the contributors basically onto the early Guac project. And so we're the interesting thing about developers, especially these days, is their resume. You can pull out what they're doing before they ever talk to you. Like you can kind of spot the people who are doing good work in the community. And when one of them reaches out to you, that's like the best possible scenario. And yeah, and despite obviously being on the younger side, that comes with certain conditions. But a lot of the initial investments we made on the tech side was to make development here very easy. So put all those guardrails in place, make the software development process super seamless, and so folks can plug in and just get the things done without having to worry about the whole scope about how something is going to move from amorphous in my source code all the way up into running production and do that safely. So we're able to because of some of the early really strong hires we made, have folks like that drop in who are just like you can tell that everybody's gonna work for for them someday, like this, like they're superstars, and if we can bring them in and help them both grow, and then yeah, give them that opportunity to tell that story. It's just a win-win for everybody. Like he's so smart, and I would hire them like 100 times out of 100. But yeah, you're trusting that they're making the right technical decisions with enough guardrails around them to not crash the car. Um, but we like driving over speed bumps fast once in a while. See what happens. It's okay.
So, as a, security company, there's got to be a lot of, we can't really afford to have a big security oops because like that is the core of what we do. So, when you're thinking about, the company culture, you've got to balance that sort of, you know, fast delivery and nimble responsiveness to, what the market needs, but also do it in a way that's, sustainable for your, staff and provides a secure solution. So like, how do you know, think about approaching building that culture and setting those guardrails that you talked about?
Well, I think one is just making sure that everybody knows that that's the case, right? It's a little bit, it sounds silly, but unless you state it, that's a thing that can be missed, right? That's a big deal. That's a company ending event. So that just can't happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to like work this way. And then again, with those general guidelines, just let people go. That also just comes in a little bit with finding the right people who have done this sort of thing before, and because it's a fairly annoying thing to engineer from the beginning, right? It is like a cloud native CI/CD stack with everything working. Yes, there's tools and that you can plug in every little bit. And, there's some very obvious choices for a lot of them, but like still you have to do it, and still you have to put the pieces around it. Um, but one is just, yeah, find those people again who are passionate about this sort of a thing, and it's like they are just experts at this. And so that was like our number one. Number two hire was just folks who can do that. And then separately, there's just this open and honest and direct way that we tend to operate. A lot of this is born from, spent a million years over at the hedge fund called Bridgewater Associates, which is a pretty famous culture of just being straightforward. And so you don't need to be a jerk to be straightforward. You can be straightforward and just make sure that, hey, this certain thing can't happen, this thing can. And it's just operating like that constantly, like, hey, this is cool, but this isn't. And so steer back and giving that feedback constantly self corrects. Like it pretty quickly makes those issues bubble up to the top. And so one is just, yeah, maintaining that being in the thick of it, especially when everything is forming, setting those expectations that, yeah, it is unacceptable for folks to perceive that this thing is going in one of those unacceptable directions and not say anything about it. And it would be great if everyone said, we don't know what we're doing. We have to figure this out, but it's headed that way. So let's figure that out. That's like the absolute outcome that we're looking for. So making it okay to fail, making it not okay to silently drive the car towards a wall that we can all see coming and not be like, guys, we should probably turn, but I don't know how. Yeah, so that's a lot of it. I think it's more just personal dynamics than anything super secret.
So one thing that's new to me that I've never had in role before is our weekly demo calls where it's not just the engineers but it's marketing, community, executives. Everybody gets a turn on the wheel and gives a demo of some kind of what they've been working on that week. Can you talk about why you feel that's valuable and what kind of contribution that's made to Kusari?
Yeah, so I think most people can understand that even when, so we're a remote company, we're all over the place. And so that there's just some aspect of a lot of the time we see each other, it's through a screen. But even when you're in an office and sitting next to people all day long, oftentimes you don't exactly know what they're doing day to day. And so you get this kind of funny relationship with understanding kind of what they're doing, but never really seeing it even though you're right there. And that's something we always found a little bit funny in terms of company cultures was just the silent or the invisible walls that kind of go up between people. And so, yeah, one of the things we started doing right from day one was we make it stupid on purpose. It's like a silly Wheel of Fortune style wheel with everybody's name on it. And it doesn't matter what role you're in, everybody presents something at the end of the week for what they were doing. And it's an interesting, silly, little fun way to keep everybody engaged, keep it still lighthearted, because again, we're not trying to make this some bureaucratic thing. It's supposed to be fun, but to really show that like, hey, this is what people are doing, this is what people are working on, and that gets interesting perspectives that might have not come out if you're not doing that force uh, cross pollination. Like it might be really difficult for some of the folks working on our infrastructure backend to see what's going on in the marketing world and how what they're doing even ever shows up over there. And the other way around, having folks who are more public facing get a glimpse into where some of the difficulties are going on and have that adjust the messaging, or even just within engineering teams, like, hey, I was doing on this and seeing what the folks did with it over there. So it's a neat way for us to keep keep that culture going. It's something that I saw a few others do. A couple of our friends that we work with do a similar thing, and I thought it was a good way to keep everybody in the loop, informed, and try your best to keep those walls down as much as you can. Plus, it's fun, like, and you get to be silly, and you make sure that the clicking sounds are happening. Good opportunity to be a goofball, which I know we both like to do.
So this is your first time as a founder and CEO, right? So like, what has been maybe like the most unexpected thing for you in the last few years at Kusari?
That there is no right answer for anything, and that and that when you the wildest thing to me was when I was always in big companies, bigger companies, and there was at the end of the day there was always a catch or a backstop for decisions. But when you stare in the face of like, how do I decide if I want to take this funding, or what sort of market do we want to go after? There are no decisions that are objectively right. Everything is a balancing act, and there's way more. That's probably the thing we should do than anyone cared to fill us in on in the beginning. And so the amount of like dealing with ambiguity was a was a learning. Still is a learning, but getting comfortable saying like I've got, I don't know, four out of the nine variables in order to solve this equation. So I'm going to have to guess what they are and learn and just adjust quickly as we move. Was I think the biggest thing. That and just how much stuff there is to do. Like there's just a lot of stuff to have a company operate and not, miss things like taxes and stuff. Just a lot of it.
Thanks for joining us this time, Tim. And we'll see you next time on another episode of Coffee with Kusari.
Thanks, Ben. I'll bring coffee next time for real though.